Right, well, we haven't had you on for some time now. I want to mention that Nick Begich is going to be speaking at the Conspiracy Conference. It's going to be on the weekend of, I guess, the 28th and 29th, the 29th and 30th of this month. And if you want more information on the Conspiracy Conference, that's Saturday and Sunday. Why, you call 209-832-0999, and my secretary says it's the 28th and 29th. So that's 209-832-0999 if you'd like to know more about it. But Nick, you'd sent us the videos, DVDs that you'd made up on mind control. So why don't you just get started telling our listeners, and then in about 3 minutes we'll cut and bring in some more listeners, and then we'll repeat what you've said and go from there. Go ahead, though. How did you get started in your study of mind control?
Sure. You know, this really is the outgrowth of my interest in electromagnetic fields effect on the human body. And, you know, this is going to be the subject of my lecture when I'm down in your part of the country down there in Northern California. And, you know, this idea of controlling first the emotions of human beings and later looking at more sinister uses and applications of the technology. But the research goes back, really back to the Korean War and even maybe before. But during the Korean War, we had prisoners returning afterwards. That in the phrase brainwashing was actually coined right around that time, 1950s, because people's attitudes and outlooks on life had changed so profoundly. And from that time, a lot of interest was focused on this area through the 1950s and 60s, eventually developing technology for influencing emotional states as well as other states of consciousness. And sort of the future, the newest things are actually transferring sound directly in to the human brain. So lots of things are coming, you know, in this area, and it's kind of from my perspective at least, probably one of the most important areas for serious public discussion right now because of the state of technology.
But I don't think that the establishment wants a public discussion, doesn't want people to realize that their minds can be shaped, their tastes formed, their ideas suggested largely by people that they have never heard of.
Yeah, you know, I think to some degree that's probably true. You know, although there was, you know, if you go back to the 1970s, in June of '75, there was a CIA Commission report, and this was an investigation by the Congress. The report is to the President by the Commission on the CIA activities within the United States, and it was after Watergate and some of the abuses had come out, and it covered a number of areas, this report, but one of the areas it dealt with was this whole idea of manipulating human behavior, and at that time, primarily through chemical means.
Was that the MK Ultra report or the one that went into behavior modification?
It was they discussed the MK Ultra report in the context of this, and a lot of the things that the CIA had done, say, during the 60s and early 70s. And what the conclusions, you know, of the report were obviously they'd gotten way out of control. But more than that, the CIA...
Hold that thought right there. Well, this is Dr. Stan here at Radio Liberty, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay and bringing you the news behind the news, the story behind the story. Our guest today is Dr. Nick Begich, and Nick Begich is going to be speaking at this Conspiracy Conference, which is going to be held on the 28th and 29th over by Great America, not the same place it was last year, but just down the street from there. If you're interested in going, and if you'd like to know more about this, Nick is going to be there. A number of fascinating speakers will be there, and the telephone number to call is 209-832-0999. That's 209-832-0999. If you'd like to learn more about going and, of course, who's going to be there, get a brochure on it, that's 209-832-0999. Anyway, Nick is going to be talking on mind control, and he was just mentioning that back in the mid-1970s, why there were several congressional reports that came out about these secret studies that were being done by the CIA. MK Ultra, and this gets into Artichoke and Bluebird and all of these mind control programs. And then, of course, there are certain reports we have on behavioral modification. the government was spending tremendous amounts of money to learn how to control you and I, to control our emotions, to control every aspect of us. And, of course, they weren't supposed to be doing this. They were supposed to be protecting America, but that wasn't their objective at all, was it, Nick?
No, actually, the idea, there were several things. One was the idea of influencing behavior of, subjects within the United States and outside of the United States. In the case of a lot of this work, human test subjects were military personnel and other civilian and personnel, many of whom, were finally acknowledged, only in probably the last 7 or 8 years. And, back during the very end of the Clinton administration, it was Secretary of Energy O'Leary who identified 500,000 Americans being victimized by human experimentation. Some of those...
500,000 Americans victimized by human... and there's probably a lot more than that. A lot of... you will never know when you've been experimented, when you went to the hospital, psychiatric hospital, and the military. They use Americans as human guinea pigs, and usually they never know.
Yeah, and this has happened, a lot more often than people realize. In the area of mind control technologies, we took and really kind of looked at this from a technical point of view in terms of what had been evolved over the years. And, going back, say if you go back to the even the early 1960s when a LIDA machine, LIDA, was captured. And
hold that thought for just a moment here. Well, Dr. Begich has been talking about, how there's this continual effort to experiment on the human beings, Americans, without their knowledge or consent, in total violation of the Nuremberg precepts. But you see, nobody's ever punished for the terrible things that have been done and the terrible experiments. And we're talking about at least 500,000 Americans. Much of this is covered in a report we carry called the Rockefeller Committee report, put out by the Veterans Administration, where hundreds of thousands of Americans have been experimented on, and of course they've just touched the tip of the iceberg. So pick up the story there, Dr. Begich.
Yeah, this whole issue, when you go back and sort of look at what was going on in the earlier days, it was mainly the capturing of some equipment that got us interested, and then the microwave beaming of the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, which captured a lot of interest. And then there was sort of a review of what was possible with oscillating fields, not just in influencing health, but actually trying to override the activity in the brain. First, just changing emotional states by sort of hitting those areas to sort of make a person lethargic or passive or highly aggressive, depending on what they wanted to do. And this then went on to the idea of maybe they could transfer direct sound information into the human head in a directional kind of way or in a mass way. And this is where the technology has essentially evolved. In fact, this idea of beaming sound directly into the human head was the subject of a recent April 22nd, 2005, Portland, Oregon. There's an Associated Press report that actually talks about that technology being evolved in even the private sector, and a technology that's now won a major MIT prize for basically being able to do that, transfer sound like this voice that you're hearing on the radio today, only directly into the brain of an individual where nobody around them hears it, just the person that's targeted or the crowd that's targeted. So, that's a pretty profound change in technology.
Well, these things sound so sort of X-Files, and yet I'll never forget talking to a man who'd been in some sort of a special forces unit in the military, and they were sent out on a nighttime exercise, and as they were approaching their target, every man in his squad was suddenly paralyzed. They couldn't move at all. They were simply totally incapable of moving, and there was some sort of a beam that was beamed at them, and then, of course, they turned off the beam, and somebody jumped up out of the vehicle that they were approaching and said, "Hey, fellas, go on back to your camp, thanks so much." But, of course, they have that ability. The American people don't understand that all this money we're investing, supposedly, to combat the wicked communists or the wicked Chinese or the wicked Osama bin Laden, is really being designed to control the American people, of course.
Well, this is a lot of this technology. In fact, there's a recent one that was developed in the last 4 or 5 years, and it's this Humvee with a dish mounted on it. The story, as it's been reported, is it creates heat sensations on the surface of the body using a focused microwave. And which is true, it can do all of that. But what they don't tell you is that by altering the frequency or pulse rate or any number of other parameters, you could actually influence or override any number of systems within the body, whether it's targeting a specific organ like the heart or the liver or the lungs, or creating that type of paralysis that you're describing, or other effects on the body or the brain. This is the subject of a lot of research. In fact, University of Utah, under contract to the Air Force, did a study on radio frequency dosages called the Radio Frequency Dosimetry Handbook in 1985 that describes all of that, which is well within the capability of this new device that's been announced for the battlefield. And that's, again, a riot control device, both for domestic and foreign use.
And, of course, be used domestically against the American people because they know there's going to be domestic unrest here when the economy collapses, if there is a terrorist attack, real or feigned, or having to do with the unrest that they're fomenting by encouraging illegal immigration so they can play one group against the other. So there's no question they're planning, long-range planning for domestic unrest, but they have the weapons now to control the people.
Well, and we track sort of the evolution of some of this, and back in the 1980s, beginning in 85 with one national conference, and then again in 87 and 89, where Department of Defense and Department of Justice actually began to evolve and did finally finalize in the early 90s a protocol of agreement where funding for dual-use systems that can be used domestically as well as overseas in the non-lethal area, which is where they place these weapon systems, now get priority funding. So, the idea of, would they be abused? Would technologies like these be abused? There's a book that was written back in the early 70s when a lot of discussion was going on in this area by Zbigniew Brzezinski, of all people, later National Security Advisor to Jimmy Carter and one of the activists in the Trilateral Commission. But his view of this type of technology in a book called Between Two Ages, he suggests that, no matter who was in power, conservatives or liberals, the idea that this technology would evolve and be abused, he felt was just going to override what would eventually happen, which again is why, there's not been much discussion since the 70s, and yet the research we've done shows, dozens of patents filed that are in the public record, as well as military research and studies in this area well past the 70s when the last real congressional public oversight was made.
Well, of course, that book you're speaking of, Between Two Ages, America and the Technotronic Age by Zbigniew Brzezinski, really talked about how wonderful Marxism was, and it's really written by an elitist, for the elitists. In fact, it had such an impact on David Rockefeller that he hired Zbigniew Brzezinski to organize the Trilateral Commission, a group of elitists, who really want to control the world. That's what they're really all about.
Well, and that book actually has played out to be you could read it now like a history. I mean,
right, of course, almost like a prophetic book at that time, or the history of the past.
Yep. Yeah, when you read it today, and it's one that's still out there. People can find that book, and I recommend it. To get an overview of where these people think the world should be going. I mean, it makes for, at least in my view, when you consider technologies that not only invade your privacy at fundamental levels, but have the ability of having huge physiological effect. And there's been no real public debate. There's been little bits and pieces that make the news over a 20-year period. And what we've done in a lot of our research is pull that all together in a way where, you sort of document the evolution of it on a technical side as well as sort of the doctrine side, what the military is intending to do to overcome the obstacles in bringing this new technology about. I mean, the idea that you can enhance human performance is sort of the other side of the coin in terms of things like speeding up the ability to retain and more or less download knowledge. In other words, be able to take information, transfer it into the brain in a way that's more rapid than conventional learning on a scale that would be just unimaginable in the past. And so these things are, being considered, but when you consider them, there's a lot of factors. One of them is the idea that when information is sort of dumped in the brain, there's mechanisms of consciousness that filter out right and wrong and good and evil that don't get a chance to make that filtering. So,
but of course, they can alter that by creating a split personality or simply a dissociative personality. And some of these people, have actually been experimented on, and they've created dissociative personalities. And I've talked to the psychiatrists who've worked with these tragic victims of these macabre experiments on human beings, carried out not in Hitler's Germany or by the wicked communists, but by our own Central Intelligence Agency.
Right. And the idea that you have to split the personality makes sense when you think about if you feed an information that's in conflict with what you normally feel and think. This is conflicts of basic beliefs is where most psychosis originates, and so you get that fracturing because that's not the way people are intended to operate, with conflicts at a base level. This is why we had a conscious mind that sort of filters out how information goes in and how we store it. But when you start messing with that without restraint, a lot of things can happen that are unforeseen and uncontrollable, or controllable with very different kind of outcomes than most of us would like. I mean, think about, for instance, if you could control learning a language. That's kind of neutral. You learn a language, how you use it becomes more interesting. That would be something that would be quite remarkable. But at the same time, think about educational structures in the United States as these technologies advance and move into civilian sectors where you have compulsory education and curriculums being set by think tanks run by, huge organizations that maybe have an agenda much different than yours or mine. And this becomes incredibly important when you start to talk about these technologies that are advancing rapidly and moving quickly into the civilian sectors. And I think that's something that needs to be, a concern, to us right now.
Well, I think that most people don't have any idea what really goes on in the secret organizations. They call it intelligence, and of course we can't let the people know because Osama bin Laden living over there in that cave might find out what we're doing. But of course it's really all about, in the name of national security, not letting the people know, because we're not smart enough to understand what their plans are for us.
Right. And I think this is, again, a lot of this technology. There's a document U.S. Army War College put out in 1989 called The Revolution of Military Affairs, and they got into some of the technologies that just touched on, privacy and some of the other areas that were of interest. But what they said back then in 89 was essentially that American values wouldn't allow a lot of these technologies to evolve. But instead of stopping there, they proposed in this document to create an environment of fear by elevating concerns over terrorism and international drug trafficking.
And that, of course, is exactly what they're doing. They're creating an environment of fear so that the American people will, oh my goodness, we have to take off our shoes and we have to go through all these things in the airports. We know the terrorists are ready to strike us at any time, but of course we can't close the borders, or we can't profile people from the Middle East, because of course that wouldn't be nice. So we're going to create fear in the hearts of everybody in America, because after all, why Osama bin Laden is going to get us if we don't. We'll be right back in just a moment here at Radio Liberty. A very important book is called AIDS, the Unnecessary Epidemic. Actually, it's a book I wrote back in 1991. It tells you the story of the politics of the AIDS epidemic and the fact that doctors have been blocked at every turn from doing what was really necessary to stop the spread of this horrible plague, both in the United States and throughout the world. AIDS, the Unnecessary Epidemic, it gives you my story of my effort working within organized medicine, the fact that the doctors of the state of California consistently voted and supported an effective public health policy, and at every turn their efforts were frustrated by those working within organized medicine, both at the state and national level. And the tragedy is that people are dying in America today unnecessarily. Call 1-800-5HIV-WAR and ask for AIDS, the Unnecessary Epidemic, because you need to understand the background to this epidemic to understand what is really happening medically in America today.
If you're looking for a residential care home in the Morgan Hill-Gilroy region, consider Morgan Hill Manor. The facility has private and semi-private rooms, 24-hour supervision, licensed vocational nurses, special diets, help with the activities of daily living, recreational activities, housekeeping, transportation for medical visits, television, private phones, internet access, personal laundry, hairdressing, and many other services. Morgan Hill Manor is hosting an open house at 17090 Peak Avenue in Morgan Hill from 2 to 6 p.m. on Thursday, May 12th. That's 17090 Peak Avenue in Morgan Hill from 2 to 6 p.m. on May 12th. If you can't attend, call Elsie or Jean at 408-778-9544. That's 408-778-9544 and request a brochure or additional information.
This is health journalist Bill Sardi. A secret of healthy aging was recently found among people who have lived unusually long, healthy lives. The longest-lived woman, Jean Calment of France, who lived 122 years, and man, Antonio Todd of the Italian Isle of Sardinia, who lived 115 years, as well as the Queen Mother of England, who lived 100 years, outliving one of her daughters by 3 decades, was their daily consumption of red wine. But health authorities have been reticent to recommend an alcoholic beverage to the public at large until now. Longevinex is the world's first stabilized French red wine extract in a pill, without the calories and without the alcohol or sulfite preservatives. One Longevinex capsule provides the red wine molecules found in 5 glasses of the best red wine. Call 866-405-4000 to order Longevinex. It's a revolutionary dietary supplement. 866-405-4000.
Hi, this is Dr. Tony Thierry. Are you one of the many people who take vitamin supplements? Do you take handfuls of pills each day to increase energy, reduce your pain, or improve your overall health? Now there is a better way to get the vitamins and minerals your body needs in a delicious-tasting whole food liquid supplement. Body Balance. Body Balance contains 121 essential vitamins and minerals and is made from only organic and natural sources. Developed by doctors, Body Balance was originally available only through healthcare professionals. Now this incredible whole food liquid supplement can be delivered directly to your home. Body Balance offers an extremely effective method to feed your body towards wellness, and we're confident you'll love the difference your body feels. To order your Body Balance, call me directly at 1-800-768-9763 and try it risk-free for 45 days. Again, that's 1-800-768-9763 or online at healthyfoundations.net.
Well, this is Dr. Stan. Our guest this afternoon is Dr. Nick Biggets, and Nick lives up in Alaska, and we've had him on many times in the past talking about HAARP, but now he's talking about mind control. And incidentally, if you're interested in hearing him, speaking on the 28th and 29th, or 29th over there, in Santa Clara, the number to call is 209-832-0999. That's 209-832-0999. So go ahead and pick up the story there, Nick.
Yeah, this issue, in terms of sort of how we followed issues over the years, we looked at, several trends in technology, and between all of them that we have followed, I think this is probably, at least in my view, I think the most important because of what the potential misuses are. There was some reports that we participated in, some documentaries, one that included Smirnov from USSR, former USSR Academy of Sciences, now the Russian Academy of Sciences, and Persinger over at Laurentian University in Canada, both who have done research in this same area, and whether it's to affect moods or emotional states or to create even pretty elaborate illusions or stimulate illusions within the brain, this has been done with a number of different systems, including oscillating magnetic fields, which are like pulsating.
Have you ever wondered whether you're really getting the truth from the medium?
Well, I think it's pretty limited in the U.S. I don't think there's a lot of investigative reporting anymore over here. You really pick up a lot from some of the more obscure sources. I mean, there's U.S. Army War College's publication Perimeters back in, I think it was 98, published the Mind Has No Firewalls, which was a reprint of an article out of Orienteer, a Russian military journal, with some edits from the U.S. side. But basically what it talked about is these methods for manipulating human behavior in pretty dramatic ways. And, when we quoted that in Earth Rising, and it's this concept of being able to either use television or radio broadcasts or internet connections or any number of signal broadcast carriers, and then being able to put a subsignal, sort of a quiet signal that you don't really notice, but it has this profound effect on us physiologically or mentally. And this has been around now for years, according to the published research on the subject matter.
And I really think it's so important people understand that this has all been very well refined, and it is not aimed at trying to control Osama bin Laden. It's aimed at controlling the American people. They know how to do this. They've developed the techniques. They have an extensive they're collecting actually dossiers on every American citizen today, the name of fighting Osama bin Laden over there in the cave. So, I think this is a very frightening thing, and it really does work, doesn't it?
Yeah, the technology has been refined enough. There's been enough public reports, and there's actually been enough patents awarded. And normally, patents that have national security value tend to get withheld. In this case, you're seeing some of these patents actually move forward and actually make it into the record. And the most outstanding is this recent release of being able to put that proverbial voice directly into someone's head. The fact that that's being openly discussed is a pretty phenomenal step. There was actually a report, we quoted it was Air and Space for the 21st Century, put together by the Air Force back a few years ago. And here's what they said in 1996 when they published this, and I quote, "It would also appear possible to create high-fidelity speech in the human body, raising the possibility of covert suggestion and psychological direction. Thus, it may be possible to talk to selected adversaries in a fashion that would be most disturbing to them." And that's exactly what ran in this April 22nd story this year by the Associated Press, and it ran on. It's actually posted on ABC News' website. But it's just a story of a guy who developed a private patent for doing exactly that. That's directionally oriented, so we can kind of point it into a crowd and hit just one person, and start talking to them, and they're looking around, no one else is hearing them. It's like the voice of God. That kind of experience for someone can now be created synthetically. And MIT has just recognized it with a major $500,000 prize for one of the most outstanding technologies developed this last year.
But think of the implications. Think of the loss of our free will when we can be manipulated, and our moods can be actually influenced by electromagnetic waves.
Yeah. The thing about this is when you look at it for some of these things for therapeutic purposes, you can look at narrow biofeedback or brain biofeedback, which is a little bit different in that it's not affecting you artificially. You're actually hooked up to where you're watching your own brain activity on like a computer screen, and then you maybe run a race or cause a ball to bounce or do some very specific thing. And what's actually happening...
You're going to have to hold that thought right there, Nick. Tape set, Genocide, and one of the tapes is an interview with a Dr. Dinnigan who heard back in 1969 actually a talk given by Dr. Day, who would later become the president of Planned Parenthood. And Dr. Day laid out the whole plan for America, the fact there are too many people, the fact that we're going to have to create new diseases, the fact that we're going to have to conceal some of the very obvious treatments for cancer, because people are going to have to die of something. They might as well die of cancer. An incredible interview and a series of other interviews that will go into the background of what is happening in America, why new diseases are cropping up all the time. Call 1-800-5-HIV-WAR for copies of our 4-tape set, Genocide. It's vitally important that you help us to get this message out across America, because without knowledge, my people perish. America, our values, our future are under attack today.
Have you purchased or invested in gold and silver coins or bullion in the last several years? If so, you've most likely been taken advantage of. in a lot of cases out and out lied to. There are several tricks of the trade in play in the precious metals and collector coin markets. This is especially true during a hot market. Although it doesn't take a savvy investor to avoid the pitfalls of unscrupulous coin and metals dealers, it does take some common sense and the knowledge of which questions to ask. The asset management professionals at Colonial Resources can arm you with a few simple questions to ask your current broker or coin dealer. To find out if you've been taken advantage of, or if you're thinking of investing, call Colonial Resources toll-free, 1-800-685-4042. The precious metals and collector coin markets are hot and definitely where the smart money is heading. But before you make a mistake that could cost you hundreds or even thousands of dollars, call the professionals at Colonial Resources. The call and the advice are free. 1-800-685-4042. That's 800-685-4042.
Have you ever wondered whether you're really getting the truth from the media? Have you ever thought that maybe somebody's controlling your reality? Well, there's going to be a meeting. It's going to be held at the Westin Hotel over by Great America. It's going to be on May 28th and 29th, and it's going to be at the Conspiracy Conference. Now, if you'd like to know more about the Conspiracy Conference, call 209-832-0999. That's 209-832-0999. This is the fifth exciting year they've had this. Dick Gregory's going to be there, Nick Begich. There's going to be Daniel Hopsicker, Jack McLam. I'm going to have a booth, although I'll not be speaking. You're going to see really the contrast between good and evil. The Conspiracy Conference is a great educational opportunity. We hope that many of you will give serious consideration to going May 28th, 29th. That's 209-832-0999. That's 209-832-0999. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and one of the guests from the Conspiracy Conference is here. That's Dr. Nick Begich, and we're talking about the information that he's been able to amass. And, of course, people should know this, but because of the degree of control that today exists over the American media, most people don't know the tremendous advances they're making in learning how to control the minds of the population. Nick, would you like to go ahead and perhaps get your telephone number out? And you put together an excellent DVD. If you'd like to tell them about that, go right ahead.
Sure. We've got actually a new DVD on this subject of mind control, and we demonstrate a number of technologies in the course of the lecture, as well as have a CD-ROM that comes with it that has a number of the documents we're even discussing today and we'll be sharing with folks in our upcoming lectures. You can get that at 888-690-1277. Again, it's 888-690-1277, and the DVD with the CD is $20, shipping paid.
All right, fine. Well, let's go to Ed, who's calling here from Aptos. Hi, Ed. Haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, it's good to hear you and your wife. Dr. Stan, I have a brief question. I wanted to ask the guest, does he have a book out? And does he have any, or if not, any books he suggests? And has he read William Sargent's Battle for the Mind?
I've got a couple of books that touch on the subject. Our classic is Angels Don't Play This Harp, which has a chapter on this subject. We have a chapter also in Earth Rising, The Revolution Toward 1,000 Years of Peace, which was published in 2000. But the DVD is the main thing we have out on mind control right now, and we'll be releasing a book on that subject later this year.
And William Sargent, did you ever read that Battle for the Mind?
I haven't seen that one, no.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much.
Bye.
And, of course, that was Ed calling in here from Aptos. And if you'd like to talk to Nick, Dr. Begich, via our telephone number from across America, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or here on the Central Coast of California at 464-8295. That's 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. And they've literally invested hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars on these techniques of people control. Why? Well, because the plan is basically you're going to have a world-ruling elite. You're going to have a massive military that will use all sorts of techniques to control people. And then everybody else, well, they're going to wipe out the middle class when the economy collapses, and then everybody else will live just exactly as Plato described in his book, The Republic. You'll have just simply the masses. You'll have a three-class society. So we've got basically Mike calling in here from Santa Cruz. Did you have a question for our guest, Mike?
Yeah, two questions, if I could, real quick, regarding
what Nick was saying a few minutes ago about them being able to beam signals into a person and they hear voices and things. What part might mercury fillings play in the person's receptibility to that signal? And the reason I ask is because when I was a kid, my mother could hear at times a radio broadcast if she was near the tower, and her tooth was a mercury filling, and it was acting like a crystal radio receiver.
Actually, I know that's true, and I've heard that before. Do you have any comments on that at all? I'd like to make it.
Yeah, the stories, of those occurrences are certainly out there, but this is much different. It wouldn't require any physical implant of any kind, whether it was a filling or anything else. This is a technology that just capitalizes on the energetic systems of the body and allows coupling in a manner that allows energy to transfer and sound to be perceived. So it's much, much different. And when you think about this, think about it from this perspective. If you were able to use this, for instance, for deaf individuals, that might be real interesting and useful. On the other hand, because of some of the other considerations and misuses, you really want a lot of discussion before you even allow that to happen. I mean, consider, folks going around having this experience, and believe me, there's people that have been and purport to be victims of this type of technology that I certainly hear from time to time. It's hard to sort them out, but the fact that technology exists to create exactly what they're describing is no longer a secret. It's in the open literature, and I think that's important because we've been talking about this for now over 11 years as a subtopic of the other issues we've covered. And at this point, as we've watched the state of technology emerge, it really, really has to be discussed because the ability to utilize this in advertising, whether it's for political promotion of a candidate or for selling you soap, this is extremely important that the public weigh in on this and that there be some restriction on the misuses. I was talking before the break about the applications for brain biofeedback, or one of the better uses. This was done in a school district in Minnesota in a charter school to teach kids on their own without any hardware how to modulate their brain activity in an area that's ideally suited for learning or for accelerated learning. And this got 80% of that student population that was on Ritalin in that school off of all of these psychoactive drugs, no equipment necessary of any kind, and they were able to control their brain by just learning how to exercise it by getting feedback, but not an external manipulation. And so learning about the brain provides great openings for really enhancing what's possible for people, but it needs to have that kind of open light of day when we're talking about what goes on in people's heads.
And of course, the thing is that from a physician's point of view, somebody comes in and tells me they're hearing voices in their head, I'd say, you're schizophrenic. And they might be, but then, of course, they might also be the victim of these various macabre experiments that have been devised and sometimes even used to drive people mad. Well, let's go to Steve, who's calling here from Salinas. Hi, Steve. Do you have a question or comment?
Yes, good afternoon. I just tuned in. I wonder if I could ask a question about HAARP.
All right, go ahead. A little off the subject, but go ahead. Well, you got one question on HAARP.
All right, fair enough.
All I need is one, and I'll take my answer off the air. I have read that there's a third-generation HAARP Russia has developed, and if that's correct, I'd like the answer to that and its repercussions, and I'll take my answer off the air.
All right, I think, Steve, could you, pardon me, and Nick, could you quickly just review what HAARP is for many of our listeners who may never heard of it, but certainly the definitive book on HAARP and the 4-tape set we put together on HAARP is based upon Dr. Begich work. So tell us what HAARP is and why we should be concerned about it.
Yeah, it's a high-frequency active auroral research project, and it's a large field or array of radio frequency antennas that are designed for a number of weapons applications. And without getting into a lot of that, just as it relates to the topic today, one of those applications was this issue of manipulating an area above the Earth called the ionosphere in a way that caused an ELF, an extremely low frequency signal, to come back to the Earth that would be used for a number of things: communication with submarines at depth, for something called Earth penetrating tomography, which is helping get visual images of the Earth. But the third situation was the idea that this very same fields and certain frequencies override brain activity and result in manipulation of emotional states of people over large geographic areas. It's a thing Zbigniew Brzezinski talked about in the book Between Two Ages when he was talking about being able to do this on sort of a hemispheric basis. Now we can do that with this technology. The Russians, I know, have researched this long before we as in the United States were involved. In fact, their Duma, their legislature, back in 2002, passed a resolution opposing our use of the technology, specifically the use for influencing human behavior, environmental manipulation, and some of the other more, sinister uses of the technology. So, they certainly are aware of this.
Now, you have actually spoken to the Parliament over there in Europe, haven't you? Aren't they very, very concerned about this? But you see, the average American doesn't know. Over in Europe, everybody knows about this, but here in America, because of the control of the media, the average person has never heard of HAARP, or if he has, he thinks it's just something, that goes right along with black helicopters and chemtrails.
Well, the thing with HAARP that happened in the European Parliament, they just didn't deal with the straight-up military issues that bore themselves out, but they also dealt with this non-lethal weapons area, this idea of manipulating human beings within the context of a resolution that we were able to get passed. And this is back in 1999. And the reason we were able to get it passed is we demonstrated a device that actually transferred sound into the brain in a way that bypassed a normal hearing mechanism. Now, we didn't do it remotely like this latest inventor that's just been reported in the news in the last month or so, but we did it with physical contact to the skin and then using the nervous system to carry the signal. But the fact is, by demonstrating that basic mechanism and then presenting the literature that was not classified literature, the European Parliament acted on this and called for treaty dialogue to create an indefinite moratorium over any technology that manipulates human behavior as a basic violation of human rights. And, you don't have, the First Amendment is based, freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, all that's based upon one basic premise, which is freedom to think what you want. So anything that influences that certainly should be the subject of a whole lot of discussion.
I think it should be, too. Well, let's go to Mac, who is calling us from Illinois. Hi, Mac. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from about 4 counties west of Chicago.
All right, fine. Do you have a question for our guest?
Well, I have a comment. This gentleman spoke about, and correct me if I'm working in the workshop, about in the future they're going to have to notify you when they do psychological testing on your children.
That was the last hour's program, and no, they're supposed to, but they're not going to.
But they haven't, because my daughter, who is going to be 24 soon, told us, a few years ago, but she was already out of high school. Back in grammar school, she was taken into the nurse's office every day during lunch and given psychological tests because she was showing anger and aggression to people who were harassing her and her friends.
All right,
we were never told about that.
I know, and the attitude of the people in the schools is that children belong to them, not to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that you're justified in being concerned. But thank you so much
for
calling.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, now let's go ahead and get back to the mind control and what people are going to see if they do get your DVD, which is incidentally is very, very professionally done.
Yeah, the thing about this technology as I've seen it evolve is enough of it now is starting to make at least it's showing in some of the scientific journals to give it some concern. Even some of the ethics of the technology is being discussed. In 2002, there was a cover story in The Economist on the very subject of mind control and the consequence of the ethics of it. What's reasonable, what's rational. They didn't get much into the technology itself, but again, you're starting to see at least some of the foreign journals that have some prominence start to look at the issue in a more realistic way.
And this is really a very, very frightening technology because it can actually destroy our will. It can bring us under complete control of the people who, have their finger on the electronic button, as it were. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, it is. In fact, Smirnov in Russia demonstrated the technology to a couple, the Morrises, who later became responsible in part for the introduction of this whole initiative back during the Reagan-Bush administration for non-lethals, and they were demonstrated a technology where you could mask a signal or a message on a carrier and broadcast it into an area where people wouldn't even know it was there, and suggestions like "bring us cake" were made while they were there, which people from the street level, workmen on the street, to office workers in the building over the next 24 hours did exactly that, brought cake to this one office. And, this kind of ability to carry a signal in this way has been, amply demonstrated. The thing about it is it would be easy to, once you know how the technology works, to embed, for instance, chips on carriers like computers and TVs and radios that would screen out those signals. But, of course, none of that is happening because, the use of technology that can influence or pacify masses of people might be useful to our government and others, and that's the way they look at it. Although it would trample over every civil liberty that ever was in terms of basic American principles.
But of course, those civil liberties, the Bill of Rights, other things like that, are really an impediment to those people who would have the all-powerful government. Would you agree?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm laughing a little bit because there's one document, again, I mentioned earlier, Revolution Military Affairs, and it's on the CD for one of these DVDs that we've released, and it actually discusses the idea of creating this environment of fear to introduce weapon systems that most of us would oppose, and it gets into discussion about, well, what if we use these weapon systems out of the American territorial boundaries? In other words, we just sort of loan them to people like in South America for interdicting drugs or terrorists in the Middle East or whatever, and then they say it as if the Constitution were left at the doorstep of the country, and our servicemen and women somehow forget about all that when they leave overseas. And I don't believe that's true for a minute. I don't think most Americans believe that's true when our sons and daughters are fighting our battles overseas. They carry the Constitution with them. That's what they're there defending and perhaps, hopefully, spreading, not suppressing at the doorstep. And a good example was, in that same document, they talk about what if we make a mistake and it's not a plane full of terrorists that crashes because we've, used our technology to down it, but a group of tourists, what would we do? And then that's where this discussion happened. And we actually did that indirectly. We provided intelligence to the Peruvian Air Force a couple of years ago, and they shot down not a plane load of drug traffickers, but a plane load of missionaries, and killed them. So we were, involved in that by virtue of providing the intelligence to violate civil liberties, in the sense that no matter who it was, our principles say you let it land and you arrest people and you have trials and judges and all those things that apparently some in our government think are inconvenient.
Well, it's much more efficient if you just shoot it down. But
sure. I mean, now we're shipping our prisoners overseas. We send them to Egypt or wherever to get the interrogation.
So they can torture them over there, because we wouldn't do it. We just send them to somebody else to torture. And where is the moral outcry from the American people? Men and women are accomplices to the evils they fail to oppose. Torture is evil, and what our government is doing, what they're doing at Abu Ghraib and at certainly Guantanamo, and then sending people to other countries for horrible torture. How do we justify that?
Well, I don't think we do. I think they hide it until they get caught. And that's the unfortunate story in this. And, the sad thing is, and this is a sad thing, when you consider that once identified and the things are admitted to, there still is no repercussion.
Nobody
jail for this.
A few privates and sergeants get, of course, sent to prison, but the officers and the CIA people who ordered it, of course, get off scot-free. Would you like to get us your telephone number out just one more time?
Sure, it's 888-690-1277. 888-690-1277.
And do you have a web page people can go to?
We do, earthpulse.com, and our lectures are all posted there as well.
And, of course, Nick Begovitz is going to be speaking at the Conspiracy Conference on the 28th and 29th. The telephone number to call if you'd like more information, 209-832-0999. That's 209-832-0999. Hey, Nick, thanks very much. It's always good to have you, and we look forward to seeing you over there.
Hey, thanks for having me. Take care.
Bye-bye. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Have you ever wondered what the Vietnamese War was really all about? Why America, the most powerful nation in the world, spent 10 years fighting in Southeast Asia against a nation the size of the state of Mississippi, and America lost that war? Do you really believe that happened by accident? There's so much to the story of Vietnam that the American people have never really known. And in our 4-tape set, Vietnam, The Untold Story, you're going to get the information that you need to understand the tragedy of that event. Call 1-800-5-HIV-WAR, 1-800-5-HIV-WAR, and ask for Vietnam, The Untold Story, the story of what really happened in Vietnam that has been suppressed from the American people for the last 20 years.
Are you concerned about your child's future? Well, it starts with a sound education. VHM provides for that cornerstone of your child's future with a quality education founded on biblical principles. Our school sets high academic goals while developing moral standards. From preschool through 8th grade, your child is taught by experienced and credentialed teachers in all subjects, including our dynamic music program and state-of-the-art computer classes. Proverb 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." For over 50 years, VHM Christian School has provided peace of mind to parents knowing their children are receiving an excellent education in a loving environment. VHM is located at 427 Capitola Road Extension in Santa Cruz. Won't you call us today at 475-4762? That's VHM Christian School at 475-4762. Doesn't your child deserve a chance to try VHM?
Leading-edge dentists know the profound effect dental materials and procedures have on the health of the entire body. If you've been searching for a holistic trained dentist who can safely treat you, look no further. Dr. David Biles has been a leader in the Santa Cruz dental community for nearly 20 years. He built a solid reputation providing exceptionally high-quality cosmetic and restorative dental care long before learning the very real hazards of common dental practices. Now, as a faculty member of the Institute of Natural Dentistry, Dr. Biles has begun lecturing nationally to other dentists on alternative and complementary dental care. On request, Dr. Biles will safely remove toxic dental materials from your mouth while substituting them with safe, non-allergenic restorations. Call Dr. Biles today and take the next step to improve your health. With sedation and nitrous oxide available, Dr. Biles can help even the most anxious patients. Call 423-0121 and schedule a visit now. That's 423-0121.
Well, this is Dr. Stan back here at Radio Liberty, and really this is a fascinating subject which you really need to learn much more about. We carry a book called Operation Bluebird. It's written by a psychiatrist, Dr. Colin Ross, who's actually treated many of the tragic victims of CIA mind control experiments where they actually were intent upon creating illness in people and dissociative personalities. And because a dissociative personality, of course, can be brought to do anything they want to, and they have an amazing retentive ability in their minds, so they can be used as couriers for information. And then, of course, getting into the background of some of these macabre experiments, we have the Rockefeller Committee report. It's an inexpensive report put out by the Veterans Administration, about 1994, that talked about how they'd experimented on millions of people, specifically the people in the military. Then we have the long-suppressed government reports on MK-Ultra and on behavioral modification. We have a 4-tape set on Operation Paperclip that contains an interview with Dr. Colin Ross. It really gets into, of course, how we brought the mad Nazi scientists to America after the Second World War to continue their experiments and, of course, help the other Nazis, the Martin Bormanns and Eichmann and Klaus Barbie and Mengele to escape to South America. But we can't let the American people know that. They might begin asking, what is really going on in the world today? We have an amazing CD. It's 17,000 files of the CIA on one CD. It's simply the 17,000 files of the CIA, and it's all the records that were exposed back in those 77 hearings, and they've been all compiled. Fascinating reading going into the background of these horrible and macabre experiments. that were done on Americans. And believe me, they are still being done on Americans because, you see, there's nobody to stand against them. And if you do report them, like the Tuskegee study where they killed several hundred black men, nobody was ever punished. And the plutonium files where, of course, they killed people, feeding them plutonium and radium, and nobody was ever punished. Or the Vioxx study recently where they've killed tens of thousands of Americans. Nobody's ever going to be punished for that. And, of course, there are going to be some lawsuits, but they'll figure some way of, well, they've already voted, so you can't bring those lawsuits in state courts, and they'll tie them up in federal courts forever. And tens of thousands of Americans have died of Vioxx, and that, incidentally, is the subject of our April newsletter, which is going out. We simply give you Dr. David Graham's testimony before the Senate, testimony which was mentioned in the media, but the true testimony you've never read. So we have simply reproduced that. If you'd like a free copy of our April newsletter, give us a call at 1-800-544-8927. That's 1-800-544-8927, and we'll be glad to send it to you. Of course, we hope you'll want to subscribe or join the Radio Liberty family of supporters to help us, because we're going to bring you information you're not going to hear elsewhere. Again, the books we suggest that you think about: Operation Bluebird, written by a psychiatrist who treats these tragic victims of your tax money being used to create mental illness; the Rockefeller Committee report; the reports on MK Ultra and on behavioral modification; the excellent 4-tape set on Operation Paperclip, or our 4-tape set on mind control; and then the CD that contains 17,000 CIA files. All of this information available by calling 1-800-544-8927. That's 1-800-544-8927. And then, of course, please go to our website at radioliberty.com. Tell others about our programs. You can listen to our Internet programs there 5 hours a day and really not get very much accomplished, but you'll get an awful lot of information. And then if you have more time, a lot of our programs are archived there. Of course, you can listen to us on shortwave out across America and get the frequencies up there, or give us a call, 1-800-544-8927, and then pray for America. Pray for revival, pray for our leaders and ministers, but please pray for Radio Liberty, because we're on the front lines of this frankly satanic battle against the forces of darkness, which are rapidly strangling out the last vestiges of freedom. Until tomorrow, may the Lord be with you.